Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Maritime Conversations, brought to you by Maritime Knowledge Syndicate. Today I have the pleasure and privilege of speaking with someone who is young, dynamic. She's a record-breaking mountaineer. She is a gold medal winner of Winter Games. And of course, apart from all that, she is bringing laurels to India. That's right. It's a story of grit, courage, and sheer determination. It's my pleasure and privilege, as I said, to welcome Kamya Karthikeyan.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for having me here. And it's a great opportunity to be able to share my journey with the maritime community.
Thank you so much, Kamya. I know, I personally feel you've literally scaled new heights. But before we begin, I think I'm overwhelmed by this wall of fame right behind me. So it's a perfect background for this interview. So if you don't mind, can you just briefly take us on this lovely journey of your wall of fame?
Absolutely. So we've made frames of all the treks and climbs that I've done. And I've always collected small souvenirs from every climb. It initially started because my dad used to not come with us on the initial few treks, and my mom and I used to go. So I used to always want to bring back something to him. So that started with Everest Base Camp, from where I brought a rock. And then, it went on to Mount Stoke Kangri, which was my first 6,000 meter peak. And we brought the feather of an eagle that we found above 6,000 meters of altitude there.
Wow.
And this is Mount Kilimanjaro. That was my first of the 7 summits.
Right.
And these are flowers that you find there. They're called paper flowers. They never dry or wither off. And we bought that as memorabilia of that climb.
Lovely.
And then Mount Elbrus. So we didn't end up finding anything that we could bring back there because the entire mountain is covered in snow.
Right.
But I did also ski down from the summit of Elbrus. So we brought the ski pass that they issue.
Amazing.
And this is from Mount Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in South America, and it's the highest peak outside Asia and the Himalayas. And we found a horseshoe there. It was a very difficult and challenging expedition. And at a time where we needed luck, we found the horseshoe, which in both our cultures is considered a sign of good luck. And it definitely brought us a lot of good luck on the climb as well. And then this is from Mount Denali, which is the highest peak in North America, and it's considered one of the toughest climbs even out of the 7 summits compared to Everest.
Wow.
And since we went on an unguided expedition, there was a point in the expedition where we had to leave some of our luggage as a cache because it would have been difficult to carry all of it and walk. So we leave half of it midway through the trek. We dig a hole in the snow and cache it there. And to mark our cache, we leave these flags. The stick, of course, was a lot longer. It's about 6 feet.
Wonderful.
And the flag has our team name and permit number on it so that we can go and identify where our cache is. So
Lovely.
It's a good way to remember the team and the expedition.
I think this is a wonderful way of
Exactly.
keeping the memories intact. So lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. After that exciting walk down memory lane, I think the first question I should ask you, Kamya, is please take us back to that moment where the love for mountains began.
I think it's somewhat always been there. When I was about 3, my dad was posted in Lonavala, and on all the weekends we would try and go out into the Sahyadris. Duke's Nose was right in our backyards. So that was where I started exploring, right from when I was in a baby sling to when I could crawl up these trails. And later on, my dad started climbing the bigger peaks in the Himalayas. He did his mountaineering courses and he started leading expeditions. And he would be either out on sailing or he was on an expedition. So a lot of the times I would miss him and I would ask my mom, why does Dadu leave us to go to the mountains again and again? So my mom said, let's go find out for ourselves. And she took me on my first trek when I was 7 years old. So right after my first standard summer holidays. And we went to Chandrashila Peak in Uttarakhand, and I think since then there has been no looking back, and every year we've gone back to the mountains, and gradually we started increasing the difficulty of what we were doing. But I think that's where the love for trekking and mountaineering began.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All these summits, tough summits, probably, I'm sure it's very difficult to give your toughest summit, but maybe two stories or two summit treks that really made you grow as a mountaineer, or that was like a leap of faith for you.
I think, like you said, a lot of the climbs are very, very difficult, and it's difficult to choose. But I think two of the 7 summits, the highest peak in South America and North America, were by far the biggest learning experiences, I would say. In South America, we had to face a lot of challenges before we could even leave on the expedition. Because after we landed in Argentina, we found out that the rule positions had changed and we had to fight a 2-week long case in their juvenile court just to get a permit for me to be able to climb. And after that, when we set out on the expedition, the guides weren't very keen on taking such a young climber because they didn't want to risk the chance of anything going wrong. So on our second last day, when we were going up to our summit camp, which was the last camp before the summit, they found a reason, misrepresented I had taken a break to kind of warm up my hands because it was a bit of a windy day, and they misrepresented that as signs of high altitude sickness, and they forced us to turn back. And we went back to the high camp where a doctor checked me and said that my vitals were better than they were in the morning because we'd gone higher up and come down. But by then the guides had sent our tent and sleeping bag to the base camp. So we had no choice. We had to walk down to the base camp, and then we fought for another chance, got a new guide, and then we had to climb the entire mountain a second time. And that second time ended up being physically even more challenging because there had been fresh snow and the mountain was colder as a result of that in the later days as well. So that was definitely an expedition that taught me a lot. And I think Mount Denali, again, it's a very difficult peak. It's considered the toughest of the 7 summits by many. And there are only 7 companies that are allowed to run guided expeditions on the mountain. And we applied to all 7 of them throughout the 2 years of COVID, but none of them were ready to take me because I was 14, because I was a girl, because we were Indian, and in their heads all of this stacked up against me. But none of them were ready to take us, so we ended up going as an unguided expedition. So it was me, my dad, and 2 other climbers, both of them Everesters from Maharashtra, and we set out on the climb. And Denali is a physically very challenging climb because unlike the Himalayas, we don't have porters, we don't have mules for any part of the expedition. And it's a 3-week long climb. So all of your tent, your food, your equipment, clothes, everything goes on a sled, and it usually weighs at the beginning of your expedition about 50 kgs. And that is in addition to a 20 kg backpack that you're already carrying. So from a physical standpoint, it is already a very challenging expedition, but we finally ended up summiting it. It was obviously very difficult, but we trained very well throughout the 2 years of COVID where we didn't go out on an expedition. We were consistently training so that we were able to do this very difficult expedition. But on the way back, we faced another big challenge because the summer had set in early. So the crevasse field had opened up. So all the crevasses, when there is winter or cold temperatures or fresh snowfall, they get covered with a bit of snow. And sometimes that snow is strong enough for climbers to walk over it. But the summer had set in and all of those snow bridges is what we call them, they had all melted. So the entire route back till the airstrip from where we get picked up was filled with crevasses. And we had no way to go back. We didn't know the route back because the flags that marked the route had fallen down and gotten buried for most of the way. And when we called for rescue, we were told no one can help unless an accident has already happened. So we were stuck there. We finally decided we're going to start walking slowly. We had told a park ranger who was at Camp 4 of the mountain, whom we had befriended over satellite phone, this is the status of the glacier, we're going to start walking, but we don't know how the route is going to be. We don't know if we're going to make it all the way to the airstrip. So we didn't know about it, but he had talked to the teams that were still higher up in the mountain, and they had all decided, one of them terminated their summit push. They had all decided to come down the mountain together, and on the last day there were about 40 of us walking in a single line, and all the guides, even without the route marking flags, they had a general idea of how the route would go. So they used to take turns and they used to probe every single step to make sure it was safe. And that route usually takes about 5 hours for people to walk through. That day it took us almost 8 hours to get back to the airstrip. But we finally did get back there, and of course, that kind of experience also gives you a lot of learnings.
Oh my God. When you were narrating this experience, trust me, I can only vicariously be at Denali. I cannot be at Denali. But something which sort of struck me, you said unguided. So my question is, when you say unguided, it means that you're on your own, right?
Yeah.
So when you scale the summit, what is the procedure like? Because you have to come back, I don't know, you have to show some proof that I went there, did that, did this.
Right. So summit pictures are the most important proof that you have. So that's why these days we only use our mobile phones, because the cameras have become way too heavy for us to be able to carry. So the phone becomes the most important thing on your summit climb. So you put it as close to your chest as possible so that it remains warm, because the battery tends to drain out very quickly. So you only take it out for that one summit picture, and then you have to put it back, and you can't take it out unless you're completely safe and it's not going to fall out anywhere. So you take a summit picture. On a lot of peaks, you're recommended to take a 360-degree video. So it shows the view from the summit. So that is used as confirmation to ensure that you actually went to the summit. And for a lot of peaks, when the weather is bad, you can't really gauge much from the video. So they have certain things that are kept at the summit. So at Denali, at the summit, there is a small seal of sorts, which has the summit height and the name of the peak written on it. So if the weather is bad, you can take a picture with that seal, and that is used as proof of your summit.
Wow. Thank you so much. All right, so I now know I cannot really Photoshop anything. Okay, so Kamya, because you sort of brought out, everybody knows about the glories, but I think the nightmares behind it are also very significant part of the story. But let me ask you, all these summits, so different continents if I'm not wrong, and it also speaks volume about the, I would say, the policy and the infrastructure or the logistics around the adventure sports, or to be precise here, mountaineering. So any particular summit which was, impeccable, everything was how you planned it to be?
I think, touch wood for us, Everest happened in a very smooth manner with respect to the factors that we could control. We always say in mountaineering, it's 40% physical, 40% mental and logistical, and the rest is up to the mountain. So there's of course a factor that you can't control, but as far as the Everest expedition goes, even from the expedition operator's perspective, Everest is a once-in-a-lifetime climb for most people. So it is ensured from our perspective of how prepared we are, how much we know about the mountain, from the operator's perspective of what all they can provide to us. I think everything is done to the T to ensure that you have the best chance to be able to summit and come back safe.
Wonderful.
So I think Everest is one climb which, from our preparation, went very, very well for us.
Well, I hope viewers in Nepal are listening to this. So
absolutely,
yeah. Because I think that this is also something which we should be vocal about, right? Logistics play a key role,
huge role.
So I think my next question, because you did mention about how physical fitness, of course, is instrumental, but at the same time, mental fitness is also very important. So can you let us know, our viewers know, how do you train, or what's the process like, both physical and mental?
I think physically is just a consistent and continuous process of keeping that fitness. And in a way, every climb acts as training for the next, because you learn something that you're definitely going to use in some way on your next expedition. Otherwise, what we do for mountaineering, our day-to-day training is usually running long distance, because that trains the legs, it trains the lungs to have good lung capacity. It's very important for mountaineering. We had to adapt our training during COVID because we couldn't step out. So we started climbing the stairs of our building about 10 to 15 times, which turned out to be very good training for mountaineering, in fact. And being so close to the Sahyadris, being in Mumbai, we've been able to go out on treks a couple of times a year at least, so that we're in touch with that terrain, walking through that terrain for long hours. And closer to the expedition, we start doing our same workouts of long walks and climbing the stairs while also carrying a backpack. So all of that, I think, in some way has helped. And then for the technical aspect of it, there are mountaineering courses, and there are a few institutes in the country which run a basic advanced mountaineering course. And they teach you the technical aspects of what skills you need to know with respect to climbing on ropes, with respect to rappelling, walking with crampons, all of those things that you need to know to be able to climb the higher and more technical peaks.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So I definitely know that the Indian Navy, contributes a lot towards this passion for adventure sports. Since you are a naval kid and part of the, naval fraternity, just briefly, if you could just talk about how the Navy has also afforded amenities which can help you to train. And we know that there are many naval kids who are making a mark in adventure sports as well as competitive sports. So something if you can talk about that.
I think definitely, I think before I even speak about the amenities, it's about the environment that we've created. Because growing up for me, while I was going out on my training runs as maybe a 5, 6, 7-year-old, it definitely motivated and helped me to see that there were so many people around me also running all these distances and running consistently every single day. And I think that creates a culture for sports and adventure within the community as well. I think as far as the amenities go, we've been using Kohli Stadium for so many of our practice runs and our training. Right. And I think there's more than enough amenities. We have the pools, we have our stadiums. Just the environment within Nofra here has helped us run so much. We have the promenade. All of it, I think, comes together. And I think, like I said, the community is the most important aspect of it, because that definitely brings about a huge change, especially for the naval kids. I can definitely say, when we see all the adults around us, if not running, if not doing very serious strenuous sport, everyone at least steps out for an evening walk. And I think having that kind of community definitely fosters that culture of wanting to do something in sport.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much, Kamya. I think you've spoken like a true leader, and I'm sure that the naval community is extremely proud of you. But now, mountaineering को हम थोड़ा बाजू रखते हैं, और we will deep dive into your debut at the Khelo India Winter Games at Gulmarg. So we are so proud to say this, that Kamya is the gold medal and the bronze medal winner at the Winter Games, maiden Winter Games in vertical and sprint ski mountaineering. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you talk about what is ski mountaineering and your experience?
Absolutely. So like you said, Winter Games is a growing interest in our country. And ski mountaineering is a comparatively very new sport, even in the Winter Games circuit. It is debuting at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics in 2026. And it's basically a sport where you combine alpine skiing, which is downhill skiing, with also climbing up wearing your skis. So our skis have an artificial skin underneath. It's made out of artificial material. It earlier used to be made out of seal skin, hence the name. And that provides a bit of friction. So you wear that and you have a heel release. So it's kind of like similar to a walking motion. And you wear that and you climb up the slope. And there are routes that are set. And at the top of the slope, you remove the skin and you lock your heel and then you ski down. So it is a competitive version of a very interesting merge of mountaineering and skiing all put together. And the sprint event is a smaller, shorter event. So it lasts on an international level somewhere about 3 to 3.5 minutes. And it's about 100-meter altitude gain, 100-meter ascent and 100-meter descent. Whereas vertical is more of an endurance event. And it's longer, it's about 45 minutes usually, and about 700 meters of altitude gain. And in vertical, you only have the ascent. So you don't have to ski down. It's only from the bottom till the top that is the competitive aspect of it. So I won a gold in the vertical and a bronze in the sprint events at Khelo India Winter Games last year. And I think it was a wonderful opportunity because it's a sport that is very similar to mountaineering, of course, and I was practicing a very similar thing for my climbs to Mount Denali and my future expeditions to the poles as well. And what we do there is called ski touring. Ski mountaineering is a more competitive version of that and on much steeper slopes. So it put to use all those skills I developed through that training and kind of pushed me to develop them even more. And I think I'm just excited to go forward in it, participate in more international competitions, and bring laurels to India in competitive sports as well.
But now that you mentioned about competitive sports, I think this is a pretty natural question. Adventure sports and competitive sports. So I'm sure the training is different, the mindset is different, the entire process is different. So help me out here how you have sort of, navigated through this.
Yeah, absolutely. They're two very different approaches because, especially in mountaineering, the only competition is to yourself. You can't compete with the other people you're climbing with. You definitely cannot compete with the mountain. So I think for me, because I've been climbing ever since I was 6, 7 years old, I never developed a very competitive mindset when it came to sports. And I wasn't the best person at very short distance competitions. I wouldn't get medals in my school's sports day sprint events for sure. So it was a very big change shifting from that mindset to competitive sport. But it does help that ski mountaineering is also somewhat endurance leaning. So that made the transition a bit easier. And I think, of course, like you said, the mindset is very different. When you're doing a sprint race in ski mountaineering, you've done a lot of training and all of that effort needs to come out in 3 minutes. Whereas in mountaineering, you put in effort over months and that effort is being out, you're showing the output over a few weeks or a few days. So that is very different, but I think I've been able to adjust to it pretty well up until now.
So, what do you enjoy more? Of course, I know that there's been like 15 years of mountaineering and just a year of competitive sports.
Yeah, I think I'm biased to say mountaineering any day, but I definitely enjoy ski mountaineering and I'm excited to explore it even more.
Wonderful, wonderful. You're 17, okay? And 17-year-old girls today, I know, are not mountaineering. They aren't part of the Winter Games. They are doing other things. They are studying. Some are binge watching, right? So, come here, be very honest and tell me. At 17, you've done so much, okay? But कभी-कभी लगता है you're missing out on something.
I don't think so actually, because for me, I've been doing it ever since I was 5, 6, and in the initial few years to kind of get that discipline, I used to literally live out of an Excel sheet. So we used to sit together and put up an Excel sheet for the whole month, and that would have time for everything from my training to my homework and other schoolwork to hanging out with my friends, spending time with my grandmother, watching TV. We used to give time for everything. So I never really felt like I was missing out on much. And I think now with the internet, even when I'm on expeditions to a large extent, I can still stay in touch with my friends back home. So I don't really feel like I've missed much at all.
And what when you come back to school, what's the reaction like whenever you're back from your summit?
I think there's a lot of appreciation. Most of the times when I'm coming back, it's somewhat close to some exam or the other. So from my teachers, I think there is a lot of support that I've gotten, and I think that's very important as well to be able to do something like this. For Everest, I had to miss about 2 months of school. When I went to Antarctica for my last of the 7 summits, I missed another month of school, and this is all within the same school year, and it's all within the last school year, which is very important. And I think my teachers have been very supportive. They're always giving me extra classes if I need it. My classmates are giving me notes. There a lot of my teachers have come home and taught me. I've gone to school on non-working days and gotten classes. So I think there's a lot of support from be it my classmates and friends or my teachers or the school administration, and I think I'm really, really grateful for that.
Definitely. I think a lot of gratitude there, but it of course speaks about your attitude. And I'm sure Navy Children's School Mumbai is very proud of that. They have a very, I would say, distinguished alumni, and she's just completed her 12th boards. So yeah, that's another feather in your cap. But as a mountaineer, I'm sure we have some young viewers and they would want to know, they would want to follow in your footsteps. Some do's and don'ts that you would like to tell them?
Yeah, I'd be honored if anyone listens to this, takes to climbing or trekking in any way. I think one very important thing I would say is to start small and to test the waters and to gradually move to the bigger mountains. Because in the recent years, we've seen this overwhelming, very unfortunate trend of a lot of people who haven't done treks, who haven't done a lot of practice climbs, who venture out into the higher mountains just because it's a dream. And we do appreciate that it's a dream. A lot of them do end up summiting these very high peaks, but a lot of them also put themselves and other people in the mountains at risk. So I would say start small. Everyone doesn't need to climb Everest to feel like they're on top of the world. You know, everyone has their own Everest, be it in trekking, be it in any other field that you want to do. But yeah, I think I would just say that. And I'm trying to take my own initiatives to try and bring trekking to a few young people whom I can hopefully motivate to take up this sport. And I'm planning to organize my own trek in the Himalayas in the coming month. And that trek, Harkidun, was one of the first treks that I did out in the Himalayas. And it's a trek that made me fall in love with trekking, with mountaineering, and it made the mountains call me back every year. So I hope it can do the same for some new young climbers as well. A very senior mountaineer told this to me before I went on my second of the 7 summits. And he said, when you're on a mountain and you feel like you're completely tired, you can't go even one step forward, you know, just breathe, put your head down. And if you can put one foot in front of the other, then that is your summit. And at any point, if you feel like you're drained, don't look up and see how much you have to go. Look back and see how far you've come, and that will motivate you to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I think that's something that I've always kept telling myself when I'm on expeditions as well.
Splendid, splendid. And so, what is next on the agenda?
So I'm doing something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So it's a challenge to climb the highest peaks in every continent, which I recently finished last December. And in addition to that, you ski to the North and the South Poles. So as part of that, I'm skiing hopefully to the South Pole in December of this year. And then that would leave the North Pole as the final challenge to be completed in April next year. And if I complete that, I aim to become the youngest person to have finished the challenge. The current record is held by a 21-year-old climber. So I have the next 3 years. And hopefully, if the mountains are on our side and everything goes well, I'll complete it by next year.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And, we hope that you are able to do that and you come back to Maritime Conversations for another part 2 of this exhilarating episode of ours. Let me say that, this particular conversation, it is a reminder that with enough passion and with perseverance, I think no peak is high enough, right? So with that, thank you, Kamya, for joining us. We really hope that what you said, the way you articulated all your points, I think it's a wonderful message to all who want to dream and who want to dream big, right? So congratulations from all of us and all the best for all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
With that, we take leave. Thank you for joining and stay tuned for more such stories of grit and determination. Thank you.